And then only the sound of her own breathing in the dark and the frantic, useless scrape of her fingernails against the unyielding stone. They didn't just bury her alive, they buried her mind. The third name is a footnote in a guild ledger. Marco, the artisan, a master of relic forgery. The official story goes, a common criminal found hanged in his cell. But the network's manuscript tells a different story. Marco wasn't just a forger. He was a satirist, a Banksy of the 14th century. He didn't forge relics to fool the faithful. A cold dread, far deeper than the stone floor, seeps into your bones. You stare into the flame, but you don't see the light. You see the law. The ironclad feudal law that 99% of people live under, but never truly understand. You see the clause, buried in dusty charters, that says when a family line is extinguished, when a plot of land is left abandoned by plague or famine, it legally reverts to the Lord. It is his to reclaim, his to reassign, and the whisper becomes a roar. This isn't a record of death, it's a receipt. And seeing it here, on a document of such public importance, makes the hairs on your arms stand on end. This isn't just a marriage, it's a message. You run your thumb over the wax. You can feel the faint indentation of the hidden mark, a secret braille for the initiated. 99% of people, even the nobles who signed this, would see only the griffin. They would see power, piety, and tradition. They do not have the eyes to see the rot beneath the floorboards, but you do. From a leather satchel, you retrieve a small corked vial. It's a pattern that will echo for 1,000 years, as powerful debtors use manufactured scandals and geopolitical force to crush the rivals they can no longer pay. As your candle sputters, casting your shadow long and distorted against the wall, you understand the final, terrible truth. The Templars weren't destroyed for worshipping a false idol. They were destroyed for becoming one. They chose a truth that worked over a faith that would drown them. Your thumb ghosts over the page, and you hear it, the faintest whisper-thin crackle of the brittle paper, like the sound of autumn leaves skittering across a tombstone. It's an ASMR quality sound of knowledge so old, it's on the verge of turning to dust. That's when your breath catches. The compass rose, tucked in the corner of the chart, isn't standard. It's ornate. Its points like daggers. And at its very center, where north, south, east, and west converge, is a small, etched symbol. The greatest lie of the Dark Ages wasn't told with a sword, but with a flame. The air in the scriptorium is thick with the ghosts of forgotten words, a smell of dust and dry rot that clings to the back of your throat. Your fingers, smudged with ink and grime, trace the columns of a heavy wool merchant's ledger. It's a litany of the mundane, bolts of cloth, barrels of salt, debts paid and owed. And then it happens. And this, not gravity, is the most powerful and most terrible force you ever discovered. Now, centuries later, we stand in the light of your science. We live in the world you built. But the whispers from that locked chest have not entirely faded. Sometimes, in the unexplained anomalies of history, in the sudden disappearances of brilliant minds, in the technologies that seem to appear from nowhere, we can almost hear the echoes of the secret war you fought alone. The conspiracy you uncovered is not just a medieval horror story. You try to map it out, to connect the dots as you would with celestial orbits. The assassins, the poison, The cover-up, the evolution from a religious cabal to an alchemical secret society. It's a perfect, self-sustaining system of control. But one question remains, the one that gnaws at the very root of your sanity. Why? Not just the immediate why, to silence dissenters, but the ultimate why. What is the final goal? What truth is so terrible, so world-shattering, that it requires centuries of murder and manipulation to keep it buried? Is it merely about power? The symbol in the margins is the signature of the thought police, and you are holding their case files. Imagine you are 12 years old. The year is 1349. The Black Death has taken your parents and 2 of your siblings. The world is a mask of terror, and the only comfort is the story of the saints, the promise that suffering has meaning. Now, imagine learning that the comfort itself is a lie. This is the emotional bomb that detonates in your mind as you uncover the next layer. You find a list. She shared these ideas with other noble women. She was creating a network not of prayer, but of dissent. And for that, the system gave her a choice: be burned as a witch or be celebrated as a saint. Both ended in the same place, a tiny stone room. You can feel the suffocating closeness, the damp chill seeping from the stone. You can hear the scrape and clink of the mason's trowel on the other side of the wall, sealing the final course of bricks. The last sliver of light vanishes. You hear the faint, dry scrape of your fingernail against the page, a sound like scratching at a coffin lid. Then you turn to the Lord's roll. The taxman's writing is a brutal, hurried scrawl. Oakhaven, 47 souls taken, plus 60 more. 60 ghosts who paid no taxes, whose land is now marked in a stark, final annotation: vacant. It's the same for the next village, and the next. The discrepancy isn't a mistake, it's a pattern. A gap of thousands of people across the Shire who died in the Lord's book, but not in God's. But your eyes are not on the words, they are on the seal. A glob of dark red wax, stamped with the snarling griffin of the de Courtenay family. But beneath it, pressed so faintly it could be a flaw in the wax, is another mark. It is a symbol you were taught to recognize in whispers, a sigil shown to you only once in a smoky back room in Padua. The twin serpents, swallowing each other's tails. The mark of the network, a silent brotherhood of thinkers, heretics, and schemers who move beneath the skin of Christendom. And at the very top, with a sum that could fund 3 crusades, is the name of your king, the man who sent you here. A chilling realization washes over you, cold as a tomb. This isn't a holy war, it is a corporate takedown. The very first too-big-to-fail crisis in history, orchestrated by the one man who owed them everything. The charges of witchcraft and idolatry are a smokescreen, a medieval smear campaign designed to justify the greatest asset seizure in a century and erase a debt the size of a kingdom. The Church's approved geocentric model, the one blessed by popes and cardinals, was a lie that got men killed. It was dangerously, catastrophically inaccurate. Following its divine guidance would send a ship crashing into rocks 100 miles from where it was supposed to be. So sailors, men whose lives depended not on faith, but on tides and stars, made a choice. They secretly passed around these forbidden charts, this blasphemous science from Islamic scholars, because it was true. They risked being flayed, tortured, and burned alive at the stake, not for a belief, but for a simple, life-saving fact. They built her a tomb while she was still breathing because of something she knew. What truth was so explosive, so dangerous to the foundation of their power, that the only solution was to bury it in a living grave and call it holiness? It is, perhaps, the world that the cynical shepherd Lucian always wanted to build. And you, Isaac Newton, the greatest genius of your age, were his unknowing and most effective architect. Did you make a deal with the devil, or did you simply choose the lesser of two evils? Did you protect humanity from a truth it couldn't handle, or did you condemn it to a prison of comfortable ignorance? The question hangs in the dusty air, unanswered. You have explained the light in the heavens, but you have hidden the darkness in the hearts of men. You realize the true genius of the congregation's system. They didn't just kill the messenger, they poisoned the message, turning the thinker's death into a warning against the very act of thinking differently. And as you sit in the growing darkness, you understand you face the same choice. You have uncovered the mechanics of a hidden world. Do you expose it, or do you bury it, just as they did, and focus on the safer, colder mathematics of the stars? Your mind, a machine built for logic and order, is now lost in a labyrinth of conspiracy. It wasn't just a cover-up, it was a form of alchemy. It transmuted brilliant, dangerous minds into simple, profitable faith. You look around your own small room, at your own complex diagrams of light and motion. You, a man who believes the universe is a clockwork machine governed by discernible laws, and you feel a profound, terrifying kinship with the victims. You realize that in another time, your own obsessive need to understand the world would not have led to fame. It would have led to a holy vision and a quick, ecstatic death. The second name leads you to a different kind of tomb. Lady Aliénor de Valois. The official record calls her an anchoress, a holy woman who chose to be walled up in a stone cell attached to a church, dedicating her life to prayer. It's a sanitized, pious lie. You dig deeper into letters from her family and find the secret they tried to expunge. Aliénor was educated. She could read Latin, Greek, even some Arabic. She read the forbidden texts, the ones that questioned the divine right of kings and the infallibility of popes. The numbers don't scream, they whisper. In the guttering candlelight, two great books lie open, their vellum pages stiff with age and authority. One belongs to the church, a parish roll of the dead. The other belongs to the Lord, a ledger of taxes owed and lands held. They should tell the same story of the Great Famine, a grim duet of loss. But they don't. Your fingers, numb with cold, trace the priest's careful script. The village of Oakhaven, 47 souls taken by God. The lie is not in the words you can see, but in the empty spaces between them. Before you, on a table of rough-hewn oak, lies the document. Vellum, heavy and cool to the touch, inscribed with the union of two great houses, de Courtenay and de Valois. The script is perfect, a scribe's masterpiece of sweeping, confident lines detailing dowries of land, the exchange of titles, the sacred promise of heirs to secure a dynasty. It is a fortress built of ink and law, designed to stand for 1,000 years. It seems standard. It seems safe. 99% of people believe the Knights Templar were soldiers of God. The forbidden secret, written here in their own invisible ink, is that they were soldiers of fortune. They were not a holy order. They were the world's first multinational bank. What they don't want you to know is that their secret initiation vows were not to a deity, but to the financial integrity of their system. A vow of silence more sacred than any oath to the Pope. And their greatest sin was not heresy, but success. The decoded text lays it bare, a list of debtors. It's not the clumsy, earth-centric mess the Church sanctions, the one that places Jerusalem at the center of a divinely ordered, predictable universe. No, this is a universe of terrifying, mathematical elegance. At its heart, rendered in gold leaf that still glimmers with defiance, is the sun. A heliocentric model, the work of a devil, they said. This is the secret 99% of people will never understand about the age of faith. They believe heretics were simply contrarians, fools courting damnation. But what they don't want you to know is that heresy was often just a synonym for what worked. Think of the corporate whistleblower, legally entombed by a non-disclosure agreement so ironclad it suffocates their career and their voice. The tools of silencing change, from stone and mortar to lawsuits and surveillance. But the architecture of the prison remains the same. The walls were never to keep the world out. They were to keep a dangerous truth in. You look down at the ledger, at the priest's frantic confession, and a new, terrifying question forms in your mind. It wasn't just that she was smart, or that her father was a problem. That could have been handled in other ways. The world of whispers and poisons, and a truth so vast, it would break the foundations of the one you have so carefully built. You think of the symbol, the circle, the line, the 3 dots. A signature for a crime so perfect, it was never even recognized as a crime. A brand for a company that owned history itself. 99% of humanity will live and die within the reality that you helped construct. A world of predictable forces and logical conclusions. It is a safer world, a more stable world. The ASMR detail here is not a sound, but a smell described by the chronicler. The scent of roasting meat, mingling with the sweet incense burned by the priests to purify the air. A sensory contradiction that perfectly captures the horror of the age. This is the choice they gave them: intellectual death or literal death. This is the modern parallel that strikes you. The way society still presents false choices to its thinkers. Conform to the accepted narrative, or face professional ruin, public ridicule, social exile. The fires are gone, but the fear of being burned remains. It was an internal affairs division for the soul of Christendom. Its agents were monks, cardinals, and scribes, men who could travel anywhere, access any library, and approach any target without suspicion. They were the perfect invisible assassins. The manuscript describes their methods with chilling, bureaucratic precision. Step 1. Identify the intellectual infection, a dangerous idea. Step 2. Identify the carrier, the thinker. Step 3. Administer the divine cure, the poison. Step 4. Document the miracle, the hagiography. Step 5. Canonize the victim, turning a dead threat into a holy relic. The system was flawless. His star charts, meticulously drawn on vellum, weren't just maps of the sky. They were proof of a universe that didn't need Rome at its center. They'd burned him for it. You close your eyes, and you're there, smelling the acrid smoke, the stink of burning pitch and human fat. You hear the horrifying wet sizzle as the flames kiss his skin. But the true horror is the sound of his life's work, the star charts, the forbidden knowledge, crackling into black ash at his feet. They weren't just killing a man, they were murdering a fact. And there it is, drawn in shaky ink, a circle with a single horizontal line bisecting it, like a reptilian pupil, a mark you realize you've seen before, on a book binding, in the corner of an astronomical chart, a secret hiding in plain sight. And you understand that this isn't just about fake relics. This is about a shadow network, a conspiracy of the powerful, and its sigil is staring at you from the page. An unblinking eye that sees everything. You are no longer just a humble scribe. You are the heir to a conspiracy, a silent fellowship of minds stretching back through the centuries. The weight of it all presses down, a physical force that makes it hard to breathe. A floorboard creaks in the passageway outside the scriptorium. Your blood turns to ice. You freeze, every muscle locked. The candle flame flickers wildly in the sudden draft from under the door, casting your terrified face in a moving tapestry of light and shadow. The heavy iron latch on the door begins, slowly, to turn. The official story, the one screamed by inquisitors and whispered in taverns, is of sodomy, blasphemy, and the worship of a demonic head named Baphomet. But as the numbers become letters, and the letters become words, you find no mention of demons. You find no defiled crosses. You find ledgers, transfer orders, promissory notes that weave a web of debt and credit, from a wool merchant in Flanders to a spice trader in Acre. You see a system for moving vast sums of wealth across borders without a single coin ever leaving a vault. The air in this hidden chamber is dead and cold. Each breath you take a plume of white vapor in the single candle's guttering light. Your fingertips are numb, not just from the chill, but from the electric hum of pure, undiluted heresy. You pry the cover open. The spine groans in protest, a dry, skeletal sound. The pages are not vellum, but a strange, resilient paper you've only heard of in whispers, a gift from the Arab world. And then, you see it. Spilling across 2 pages is a star chart so beautiful it makes your throat clench. It's the sound of a human fingernail, worn to the quick, patiently, methodically, trying to carve a single letter into the wet, cold stone. It is the sound of a brilliant mind refusing to go quiet, trying to leave a message, trying to claw its way out, not to freedom, but to truth. You sit back, a chill crawling up your spine that has nothing to do with the archive's draft. This isn't a medieval horror. It's a modern blueprint. Think of the political dissident held in an offshore black site, their existence denied. This time, it is buried by the very man who discovered it. Years later, you are an old man standing in your laboratory. The air is thick with the acrid smell of mercury and the dusty scent of ancient books. Your hands, now spotted and frail, rest upon a copy of your own Principia. It is your legacy, the foundation of a new world. But your eyes are on the locked chest in the corner of the room. Inside it lies the other world, the world of Aldrich and Heloise. Are they institutions of pure discovery, or are they also a means of control, a way to dictate which questions are acceptable and which are fringe? You pick up a page detailing the trial of a so-called heretic in 1288. The man, a weaver from Lyon, had argued that a man's conscience, not a priest, was his ultimate connection to God. A simple, powerful idea. The record shows he was given a chance to recant. He refused. He was burned. How did they maintain a conspiracy across centuries, across borders, through wars and schisms? The answer, you realize, lies not in a single mastermind, but in an organization. You find a reference in a heavily censored manuscript from the papal court of Avignon. It speaks of a Congregatio pro Sanctorum Defensium, the Congregation for the Defense of the Saints. Publicly, it was a clerical body tasked with verifying miracles and combating heresy. But what they don't want you to know is that its true, unwritten mandate was to defend the saints from the sin of thinking. A navigator from a sun-scorched coast, branded a heretic. But 99% of people who hear that word, heretic, picture a religious fanatic. The truth is far more dangerous. Diogo's crime wasn't blasphemy. It was mathematics. It was observation. You can almost see him now, standing on the deck of his ship, the salt spray on his lips, the scent of tar and adventure in the air. He didn't just sail, he measured God's creation and found it bigger and rounder than the church allowed. They told me it would be a shame if her village well was poisoned. I left that night with nothing. But I heard them talking, brother. I heard them discussing the next shipment, the next order from a cardinal in Rome himself. The final lines are almost illegible, a scrawl in the corner of the parchment, next to a crudely drawn symbol. They don't fear God, it says. They fear exposure. They have a system, a way of marking their orders, their letters, their instructions for men like me. They mark their orders with the serpent's eye. It's the same instinct that drives a prisoner to tap messages through a stone wall. The same human need to keep the light of knowledge from being extinguished by the darkness of oppression. You drag your fingernail lightly over the vellum, feeling the raised edges of the ink, the impossibly smooth surface of the gold. The soft, dry scrape is the only sound in the universe. It sounds like a secret being kept. How many? How many of the world's great medieval artworks are secret textbooks? How many cathedrals hold blueprints for forbidden machines in their stained glass windows? To find it here, in the heart of the Templar Order, is like finding your own reflection in a murderer's eyes. You dip a quill in ink, your hand moving with a traitorous familiarity, transcribing the symbols into words on a separate parchment. The room is dead silent, save for the wet scratching of your quill and the hiss of melting wax from the candle at your elbow. The air grows thick with a truth you can already taste, a metallic tang of gold and blood. This book should not exist. The man who wrote it was turned to ash and scattered to the wind, his name erased, his soul condemned. But his thoughts are here, heavy in your hands. The leather of the confiscated navigator's logbook is cracked and stiff with sea salt, smelling faintly of the pyre it escaped. You found it wedged deep within a false-bottomed chest in the archives, a place for secrets deemed too dangerous even for the Inquisition's most senior members to review. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. Or did they find him and in a final, ironic act of control, elevate him to a position of such authority that no one would ever believe his mad theories if he dared to speak them? History has no record. The secret you uncovered in that lonely manor house dies with you, locked away in a chest of papers that will be labeled incoherent and not fit to be printed. The truth of the engineered Dark Ages, the murdered saints, and the systematic suppression of knowledge is buried once more. Every creak of the old manor house sounds like a footstep. Every shadow seems to hold a shape. You are no longer just a scholar in quarantine. You are a man who knows a secret that has been kept with murder for half a millennium. You begin to see connections everywhere. The Great Fire of London, just a year from now, in the future you cannot see. How many secret libraries, how many inconvenient records will it conveniently destroy? The state-sponsored scientific societies, like the one you will one day lead. They were pruning the tree of knowledge, cutting off every branch that didn't grow toward Rome. And the most chilling part? The system was so brilliant, so insidious, that it made the victims themselves into advertisements for the very ideology that destroyed them. The ink on the page begins to bleed. A drop of water from the leaking thatch overhead lands with a soft pat, blurring a 400-year-old word. You can hear the wet sound of the rotting roof, a constant, miserable drip that mirrors the slow drip of the poison into history's bloodstream. How did they do it? 99% of people will live and die within the walls of this constructed reality, never knowing they are prisoners. So you must ask yourself the question that haunted Newton until his death, the one that should crawl under your skin and keep you awake tonight. They lied about science. They lied about medicine. They lied about famines. They lied to us about an entire age of human history. They lied about the past. What else are they lying about now? 3 names, written in the faint, rust-colored ink of the 14th century. This is the part of the story they burned the books to hide. It's the secret that proves history isn't written by the victors. It's written over the graves of those who knew too much. You lean closer, the candlelight throwing your own giant shadow against the library wall, a silent predator hunting for ghosts. The alchemical manuscript feels alive in your hands, a brittle skin holding a soul. You cross-reference the first name with a record of a church trial from 1327. His name was Diogo. It's a Ponzi scheme built on bone and wood, a mega charity where the donations of the desperate are funneled into carved marble thrones and gilded ceilings for the men at the top. The salvation of millions is just administrative overhead. The letter becomes more frantic, the ink darker where the quill was pressed hard in terror. I told my master I could not do it anymore. I told him God would not forgive it. He just smiled. The next day, the bishop's men came. They didn't threaten me. They just told me my sister had a beautiful family. Monks, forced to create religious propaganda, were embedding the very science, medicine, and philosophy the church sought to destroy directly into their holy work. They were using the master's tools to preserve the truth, hiding it in plain sight from the inquisitors and authorities who would have burned them for it. This is a secret communication system, a steganography of the soul that has gone undetected for centuries. The lock gives way with a soft, final click that sounds like a dying man's last confession. You open the codex. The pages are vellum, smooth and cool, but the text is not the Latin of Scripture or the French of the court. It is a cipher, a complex number-based substitution code that makes your heart hammer against your ribs. You know this handiwork. You helped design it for the Crown's most sensitive communications, a secret shared by only a handful of men. This was a commonwealth, an organized society with its own currency, its own laws, and its own scheduled meetings. And you've just found an invitation. You read the priest's panicked words, and the official story evaporates like smoke. Her calling to a life of seclusion was announced just weeks after her father's death. The ceremony was beautiful, the priest writes. The bishop himself presided as they bricked up the doorway, leaving her entombed. It was a life sentence without a trial, a political assassination of the mind. They couldn't execute the beloved daughter of a lord without creating a scandal and a potential uprising. So they made her a saint instead. They weaponized her piety, turning her prison into a holy shrine. You are still searching for the truth of the congregation, for the real Philalethes, for the ultimate scope of their power. What they don't want you to know is that the most powerful man in science spent half his life secretly trying to unravel a conspiracy he could never speak of. He fought a war no one else knew existed. He looked for the enemy in the margins of old books, in the formulas of alchemists, and in the faces of the men in power around him. Did he ever find them? The secret you've uncovered is that the most profound evil is quiet, patient, and convinced of its own righteousness. It wears a suit or a cassock, and it carries a ledger. And as you read about this man, Lucian, who saw himself as a gardener, pruning away dangerous thoughts, you can't help but wonder who his modern successor is. Is he in the Royal Society? The Vatican? Is he watching you? A sudden noise makes you jump, the wind rattling the window frame. But in the silence that follows, your heart hammers against your ribs. A threat not to God, but to the institution that claimed to speak for him. You feel a sudden, profound connection to these long-dead thinkers. Their struggle is the eternal human struggle, the desire to know, to question, to see beyond the walls of the prison you were born into. It's the same instinct that drives you, sitting in this drafty room, deciphering their fate. You trace the symbol again, the circle, the line, the 3 dots. It appears next to every name, a seal of intellectual extermination. They weren't killing people, they were killing futures. The secrets of the medieval past are not a lesson, they are a living blueprint for the present. The institutions that built the medieval prison of the mind never dissolved. You must understand this. They evolved, they modernized, they learned from their mistakes. They no longer need to burn books when they can control the algorithm that decides what you see. They no longer need to burn heretics at the stake when they can deplatform their voices into silence. The medieval cover-up proves a terrifying principle. If a lie is big enough and old enough, it simply becomes history. Names and locations across Europe, a monastery in the Pyrenees, a university in Padua, a printer's shop in Mainz. It's a map of their network, a network that may still exist. You are no longer just a seeker of secrets. You are the keeper of one. And you are faced with a choice that will define not only your life, but perhaps the future of an age. Do you bury this truth, or do you pick up the torch and continue the great work? Imagine your son is dying of the sweating sickness, and you sell your only ox to make a pilgrimage, to press his feverish hand against a bone fragment of a saint, believing its holiness is your only hope. Now imagine that bone is from a dog, and the man who sold it to the church used your money to buy spiced wine and a new mistress. This is the secret 99% of people in this age never learn. Their faith is not a spiritual force, but a financial instrument, a heliocentric model of the universe, a truth so heretical that to even speak its name is to bed for the fire. Suddenly, everything changes. You see it everywhere. The floral border of the page isn't just decoration. The petals and leaves are precise botanical illustrations of herbs used for abortion, knowledge the church has systematically burned. The twisted body of a crucified thief in another painting is not a study in suffering. It's a perfect anatomical diagram of human musculature, knowledge forbidden outside of a few sanctioned and heavily censored universities. This is a breathtaking act of intellectual treason. The book smells of heresy and cold stone. Its leather cover, seized in the dawn raid, is bound in iron, not to protect what is holy, but to contain what is dangerous. You run a gloved finger over the embossed cross, a symbol now synonymous with treason. But it is the lock you stare at, a complex instrument of tumblers and wards that has defeated the king's finest smiths. It has not defeated you. In the guttering candlelight of this secret royal chamber, you produce a set of slender steel picks, tools of your true trade, espionage, a small, three-pronged fork like a tiny trident, etched so faintly you almost missed it. You saw this mark before, not in a will, but scratched into the stone behind the altar at the priory. And you saw it on the edge of that strange, unidentifiable coin the boy found by the river. It's here, next to the final entry in this dead man's secret life. The entry isn't for wool or meat or medicine. It's a date, a fortnight from now, and a place, the old Roman ruins on Weeping Hill. This wasn't just a black market. Her name was Isabella, and she was the daughter of a local lord, a man with a brilliant, highly educated child who read Latin and Greek, who understood logistics and law better than most of the bishop's own clerks. And that was the problem. Her father had dared to publicly question the church's latest land grab, presenting a legal argument so sharp, so watertight, that it threatened to unravel a decade of acquisitions. He was silenced with a convenient hunting accident. But the real threat, they knew, was Isabella, and within its walls, humanity feels safe from the ghosts and demons of the past. Your fame grows. You become Sir Isaac Newton, President of the Royal Society, Master of the Mint. You are the embodiment of the New Age, the man who banished the darkness with the pure light of the intellect. No one suspects your secret. No one sees the ghosts that walk beside you. No one knows that your obsession with alchemy, which your later biographers will dismiss as an embarrassing senile eccentricity, is in fact your silent, lifelong continuation of the hunt. He believed that certain ideas were like plagues, that concepts like democracy, atheism, or female autonomy would lead to nothing but chaos and collapse. His mission wasn't born of faith, but of a profound paternalistic cynicism. He wasn't a monster. In his own mind, he was a shepherd, protecting his flock from the wolves of their own curiosity. This is the detail that truly haunts you. The architects of this centuries-long lie weren't cackling villains. They were calm, rational, and they believed they were the heroes of the story. 99% of people assume evil is loud and chaotic. Heloise wasn't just an abbess. Her letters reveal a sophisticated understanding of herbal medicine, including plants that could prevent conception, a knowledge that gave women power over their own bodies and threatened the very foundation of clerical authority. And Friedrich, he was a cartographer, but his maps, based on secret conversations with Jewish traders and Viking sailors, showed a world that was round. He even sketched a vast, unknown landmass to the west, 100 years before Columbus. Each of them was a spark of innovation, a flicker of logic in an age of prescribed faith. You can almost taste the metallic tang of his paranoia. He has looked into the abyss of history, the history we have just walked through together, and seen that the narratives we are given are not truth. They are tools. The system he has uncovered is a technology of power, refined over centuries. Manufacture a crisis, suppress the science that could solve it, control the flow of information, and then invent a history that justifies it all. He sees its echoes in the halls of the Royal Society, in the whispers of the royal court. A circle, representing the fearful masses, being pierced by a single point of light, knowledge that then radiates outward, transforming the entire shape. Their goal wasn't wealth, it was the liberation of the human mind. They let the greedy chase a fantasy of gold, a perfect distraction, while they undertook the real great work. You close the book. The heavy cover falls with a sound of finality. This knowledge is a poison and a cure. It recontextualizes all of history. But the manuscript is not finished. The last page contains not an esoteric poem, but a list. I remember sitting there, a needle in my hand, moonlight pouring through the workshop window, and I was sewing a third head for a single saint. 3 of them. And I just knew, that in a workshop in Ghent and another in Lyon, other men like me were sewing a 4th and a 5th. Imagine being a believer, truly and utterly. 99% of people who have ever looked upon this page have seen only a symbol of holiness. They don't know they're looking at a secret hard drive, a medieval flash memory for a revolution of the mind. The tiny, deliberate imperfections in the gold leaf, the radiating lines that seem like simple artistry, they form a map, a celestial chart. And it is not the church's truth. It is not the earth at the center of God's unchanging heaven. It's the sun. You open your eyes. The candlelight flickers on the monk's desperate scrawl. He tried to tell the truth, but his 4 words are just a ghost haunting the edge of a triumphant lie. They silenced the science and amplified the superstition. But as you stare at his warning, a colder question surfaces. If the church knew about the fungus, what other medical and scientific truths did they bury to maintain their power? And what about the other 1% of cases, the ones that even they couldn't explain away with black rye? They never thought to look for the code hidden in plain sight. Your breath catches. You find another symbol, a single sharp dot followed by a wavy line, a gallon of spiced wine. But you know that's not wine. That symbol means medicine, a poultice of river moss and specific herbs, knowledge the church had long ago branded as witchcraft, but which could stop a wound from festering. Forbidden knowledge, traded as a commodity right alongside poached game. They weren't just trading goods, they were trading survival. But then you see it, the one symbol that doesn't fit the economic pattern. 99% of people who hear the word anchoress picture this woman of sublime faith, her eyes turned heavenward, her soul at peace. They see devotion, they see a choice. They don't want you to know that sometimes choice is the most exquisite lie, because you have something else, something that wasn't meant to survive. Tucked deep within the ledger's leather binding, you found a folded, brittle leaf of parchment, a priest's private confession, written in a palsied, terrified script. He writes of the anchoress, Sister Agnes. Except she was never a sister, you will live 2 lives. The public scientist and the secret historian, a man forever caught between the light of reason and the shadow of a conspiracy that may or may not be watching his every move. And you will be very, very careful. The plague is over. You return to a world hungry for certainty, for new beginnings. You give it to them. You give them gravity, calculus, and the laws of motion. You build for them a new cathedral of reason, a magnificent structure of logic and proof. He is described not as a priest, but as a master of truths, a man who headed the congregation in the early 14th century, during the time of Heloise and the Templar suppression. The letter writer describes Lucian with a mixture of awe and terror. He says Lucian did not believe in God, or the devil, or even the church he served. He believed only in stability. He saw humanity as a frantic, self-destructive child that needed a firm, guiding hand. Aldrich, Heloise, and now a third, a German scholar from 1421 named Friedrich von Regensburg. They weren't powerful kings or rebellious nobles. They seem random, scattered across Europe over 200 years. But as you dig deeper into the scraps of their lives, a terrifying pattern emerges. 99% of people believe the Middle Ages was a time of blind faith. The secret is that it was simmering with brilliant, dangerous ideas. Aldrich wasn't just a monk. He was secretly translating Greek texts on atomic theory, Democritus, works that suggested the world was made not by God's hands, but by infinite, unguided particles. The candlelight shivers. You are in a cold room with Isaac Newton, the man who tamed the planets with numbers. But the formulas that cover his desk tonight are not about celestial mechanics. They are about the mechanics of control. He has uncovered a different kind of gravity, one that pulls not on moons and tides, but on the minds of men. He sees that the true great work of the powerful was never enlightenment, but its opposite, the careful, deliberate cultivation of ignorance. This is the forbidden knowledge that fuels his infamous Solitude. How to hide the seditious philosophies of Plato and Aristotle inside religious commentary. It was sociological alchemy, a conspiracy of light waged in darkness. They understood a secret that still echoes in our world. The most effective prison is not made of iron bars, but of ignorance. Your gaze falls to the intricate symbol stamped on the book's cover, the one you've seen hinted at in a dozen other forbidden manuscripts. It's not an esoteric formula. It's an icon of their true purpose. You pick up the paper again, your fingers tracing the frantic script. The splinters were the easiest part. The real work, the work that haunts my sleep, was the sewing. You see, brother, John the Baptist was a very popular man, too popular. They brought me 3 skulls, one from a Spanish crypt, 2 from a potter's field outside Rome. My job was to prepare them, to stitch scraps of camel hide and horsehair to the bone, to make them look as if the desert sun had baked the flesh to them. They shimmer with flecks of lapis lazuli and malachite. To the abbot, to every other brother, they are just scales. But with the cipher, your eyes see the truth. They aren't scales. Each tiny, overlapping crescent is a musical note. You trace the pattern, your mind humming the sequence. It's a forbidden harmony, an arrangement the church declared the diabolus in musica, the devil's interval, a sound said to summon demons. Hiding in the body of the beast is a song of pure rebellion. Your gaze drifts upward to the triumphant saint. His halo is not just a circle of beaten gold. They chose to let the people believe they were damned. Because a village poisoned by its own bread is a tragedy. But a village possessed by Satan? That's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to stage a dramatic, public exorcism. It's a chance to prove their power over a bogeyman they knew wasn't there. It allows them to manufacture a crisis, present themselves as the only solution, and in the process, solidify their spiritual and political authority. It's the medieval blueprint for control, a tactic so effective it's still used today in media and politics to stoke fear for public gain. This was the system, a vast, sophisticated peer-to-peer network of forbidden wealth that operated entirely in the shadows. It's the medieval dark web, a cryptographic commons built on trust and shared symbols, 1,000 years before a single line of code was ever written. It was their freedom, their dignity, their defiant answer to a world designed to keep them on their knees. And the authorities, the priests, the lords in their castles, they never even knew it existed. They looked at their peasants and saw beasts of burden, too simple to organize, too terrified to rebel. But the math is simple, until it isn't. Tucked between the wine and the wool, a recurring entry, month after month, year after year, for 2 decades. Sustenance for the anchoress. A small, consistent sum for bread, water, and occasionally a little wine. History paints you a simple, pious picture. An anchoress, a holy woman, choosing to be sealed into a small stone cell attached to the church wall. A living saint, voluntarily embracing a death to the world to be closer to God. Her only connection, a small slit for food and another facing the altar. They will not know that you are also the keeper of a forbidden history, a silent monument to the war against the human mind. The choice you make in this moment defines the rest of your life. You will compartmentalize. You will give the world your science, the clockwork universe, cold, safe, and measurable. But you will keep the alchemy, the secrets, the haunting truth of the darkened age for yourself. If this congregation still exists, cloaked in the robes of alchemy or even the new natural philosophy, then who are they? You scan the forbidden texts again, this time not for the victims, but for the killers. You look for the names of the cardinals who authorized the purchases, the monks who wrote the false histories, the agents who traveled across Europe. Most are cloaked in anonymity, referred to only by titles. But in one text, a bitter, angry letter from a spurned papal secretary, you find a name, Lucian. Just Lucian. The ASMR quality detail that history omits is the sound of her fingernails scraping against the rough stone floor of her cell, a desperate attempt to claw the fire out of her own veins. This is the moment you understand the system. It's not just about killing enemies. It's about creating martyrs. It's about manufacturing evidence of God's favor on demand. The conspiracy isn't just murder. It's the industrial-scale production of holiness. And the symbol in the margin? You realize it's not just a signature. It's a brand. Who were the real targets? You begin to cross-reference the names, but a new, colder fear grips you. A fear for the present, not the past. The designers, where are they now? A populace that could read, that could reason, that could govern itself without the need for kings or priests. The Philosopher's Stone wasn't an object. It was a plan. You see it all now, laid bare in the flickering light. A detailed, terrifyingly brilliant blueprint for how to secretly reintroduce forbidden knowledge back into a world that would burn you for it. It explains how to embed lessons of science within the acceptable language of astrology, how to spread knowledge of anatomy and medicine through the guise of folk remedies and herbalism. Your heart is a frantic drum against your ribs. This isn't just one man's sin. This is a supply chain, an industry. What they don't want you to know is that this wasn't the work of a few grifters in back alleys. This was a systemic industrial-scale fraud, overseen by the very men who hold the keys to heaven. Modern archaeological and chemical analysis of surviving relics today confirms Giacomo's nightmare. Traces of artificial aging agents, wood species that never grew in the Holy Land. The entire business model of medieval faith was built on a lie. George, his face serene and divine, plunging a spear into the heart of a magnificent, dying dragon. You've seen it 100 times. A simple story of faith conquering evil. A lie. Tonight you have the key. A small, brittle piece of vellum tucked into your sleeve, covered in a cipher that took you months to piece together from the margins of forgotten texts. Your hand trembles as you smooth it open. Your breath catches in your throat, a small, tight knot of terror and exhilaration. You lean closer, your nose almost touching the page. The dragon's scales. The wet, rasping sound of the girl's breathing, recorded by the priest as the serpent's hiss, was her body fighting a poison. And here is the secret that should keep you awake tonight. The church knew that visiting monk wasn't the only one. Scholars in quiet monasteries, physicians studying forbidden Greek texts, high-ranking bishops, they knew that 99% of these demonic outbreaks were not a war for souls, but a sickness from the soil. But a fungus offers no power. A sickness offers no spectacle. A devil, however, a devil is a magnificent tool. They buried the truth, the symbol for 10 bundles of raw, untaxed wool, shorn from the Lord's flock by a shepherd who skimmed just enough that the loss would be blamed on wolves. The wool was traded for the venison. No coins, no records, no trace. You can almost feel the texture of this hidden world. The weight of a stolen sack of rye, passed from one calloused hand to another in the pre-dawn mist. The sharp, metallic taste of fear as a night watchman's torch sweeps too close to a hidden cache of untaxed ale. This wasn't just a few peasants cheating the system. The ledger smells of dust and regret. Its vellum pages are stiff, cool against your fingertips as you turn them under the focused beam of a desk lamp. The air in the monastic archive is cold, still, and heavy with the ghosts of forgotten breaths. You trace the spider-thin ink of a long-dead monk's accounting, a litany of expenses from over 400 years ago. So many casks of wine, so much for beeswax candles, an extravagant payment for a Flemish tapestry depicting the martyrdom of Saint Sebastian. It's a story of quiet, comfortable faith written in numbers. To burn their story would be to commit the very crime you have uncovered. It would be to join the congregation. It would be another victory for the silence. You lock the trunk. You know you will never speak of this. You will never publish these findings. The world is not ready for this truth. Perhaps it never will be, but you will keep it. You will guard this secret history, this testament to the murdered thinkers. 99% of people will know you as the father of modern science, the man who uncovered the laws of the universe. A chance to reset civilization, to erase the dangerous knowledge of the ancients, their democracies, their heresies, their godless philosophies, and start fresh with a simpler, more manageable truth. The chill you feel is the recognition that you are living in the ruins of a far more advanced world, a world that was intentionally destroyed, and the architects of that destruction might still be on the board of directors. The fear is a physical thing now, a coppery taste on your tongue. You return to the desk, to the scattered pages that feel like live wires. One of those secrets was a substance derived from a rare ergot fungus, refined with techniques that were centuries ahead of their time. It produced not just death, but a specific kind of death. It triggered visions, euphoria, a feeling of divine connection, and a burning in the nerves that could easily be mistaken for religious ecstasy. The hymn of divine beauty was, in reality, a string of delirious, nonsensical shrieks, artfully transcribed into a masterpiece by a church that needed a new miracle. You can hear it now, not as music, but as a scream echoing down the centuries. The air in the room suddenly tastes stale, recycled, as if you've been breathing it for 1,000 years inside a sealed tomb. They didn't just hide the truth. They didn't just burn the books. They manufactured an entire historical reality, a dark, miserable, and brutish stage, all to bury one single foundational idea. An idea so powerful, so dangerous to their rule, that it was worth plunging a continent into a millennium of darkness to ensure no one ever found it again. The work is finished. The pattern is laid bare on your floor. The text describes the prima materia as the common mass, minds shackled by dogma, hearts heavy with fear. Lead was the people. The shock hits you with physical force. A single drop of sweat drips from your brow and lands on the hot brass of the candlestick with an audible sizzle. This isn't a book of chemistry. It's a book of revolution. A political manifesto of breathtaking audacity. Gold, the text explains, was never the yellow metal. Gold was the finished product of their great work, an enlightened humanity. You dip the rags in the acidic brine. You scrub it into the grain. You beat it with chains until it looks bruised and weary. The metallic tang of the vinegar catches in your throat, the same taste as fear. I did this 206 times. 206 splinters from the true cross, each one sent to a different cathedral in France, in England, in the Holy Roman Empire, each one destined to be kissed by a queen or a dying peasant. You have to put the letter down. What they don't want you to know is that the most sacred art in the world is a lie. A beautiful, glorious lie, crafted by rebels whose names are lost to time. The candle gutters. Your shadow, a hunched and monstrous thing, dances against stone walls that have seen 1,000 similar nights. The air is thick with the smell of old beeswax, damp wool, and the faint, sharp tang of fear, a metallic taste on the back of your tongue. Before you, on the heavy oak lectern, lies the manuscript, a depiction of Saint 1-9. Ergot, when ingested, is the raw, natural source of lysergic acid, LSD. The fire the men felt in their skin wasn't hellfire. It was a condition called St. Anthony's fire, where the fungus restricts blood flow to the extremities, creating an agonizing burning sensation that can lead to gangrene. The convulsions aren't a devil wrestling for a soul. They are violent, uncontrolled muscle spasms caused by toxic alkaloids attacking the central nervous system. The terrifying visions of demons and angels are not glimpses into another realm. They are powerful, chemically induced hallucinations. The truth is here, in your hands. A rebellion fought not with swords, but with secrets. You begin the slow work of translation, your mind mapping the arcane to the mundane. A tiny, almost invisible crescent moon? That's not an accident. That's a full-grown deer, poached from the Lord's own forest under a sliver of moonlight. Enough meat to feed a family for a winter month. A small X beside it? A transaction traded. For what? You scan further down the margin. 2 vertical lines, crossed by a third. What was this secret society of healers she belonged to? And how many more of them were burned to keep their knowledge hidden? You pack your bags, your books, your pages of equations that will redefine the cosmos. At the bottom of one trunk, you place the locked chest containing the medieval manuscripts. You hesitate. Your hand hovers over the key. You could burn them. You could destroy the evidence and unburden yourself of this terrible knowledge. You could erase the names of Eldrick and Heloise and Friedrich forever, and in doing so, perhaps save your own skin. It would be the logical thing to do, the scientific thing to do. But you can't. New archaeological evidence from our modern era suggests that Roman medical tools were often more sterile and sophisticated than those used 1,000 years later. They had advanced concrete, complex aqueducts, and societal structures that simply vanished. History teaches us this was the result of barbarian invasions and societal collapse. But as you stand here, in this room full of secrets, you wonder, was it all just collapse? Or was some of it a controlled demolition? Was the fall of Rome not just an event, but the beginning of the great cover-up? It's a merchant's private ledger, and a single entry dated 3 days before her death records the sale of a rare spice blend to the abbey's infirmary, a purchase authorized by a visiting cardinal. The merchant notes its incredible expense and its unusual origin, a closely guarded recipe from the remnants of the Knights Templar, recently and brutally suppressed. What they don't want you to know is that many of the Templars were not just warriors. They were masters of chemistry and finance, with secrets wrested from the Middle East. It's a form of control so profound it feels like a law of nature, an invisible prison for the mind. You see it now. You see the entire monstrous design. Just as a modern state might control the flow of information through technology, they controlled it with fire, fear, and faith. You stagger back from the floor, your hand flying to your mouth to stifle a gasp. The pattern is complete. The sheer, patient evil of it hits you not as a thought, but as a physical blow. A pressure in your chest that makes it hard to breathe. You read on, your mind racing, reevaluating everything you thought you knew. And then you see it, the diagram that changes the world. It's not a crucible, it's a map of a village with lines of influence radiating from a central point. A library, a physician's house, a secret school. The text beside it speaks of the prima materia, the base material for the great work. But it's not lead. 99% of alchemists, of kings and popes who hunted these texts, never understood the truth. But this letter, passed through 3 sets of hands, tells a truth that smells of sulfur and conspiracy. He wasn't punished for being a bad artisan. He was exiled for threatening to become an honest one. They brought me the wood, he writes, common pine, oak, sometimes olive. My master, a man who weeps at Mass on Sunday, would hand me a sack of iron filings and a jug of vinegar. Make it look old, he'd say. Make it look like it has seen our Lord's blood. It is a legacy, a weapon. You can almost hear the soft, grinding sound of the millstone as it pulverizes the rye into flour. The poison now invisible, a ghost in the dust. You smell the sour, sweet scent as the baker's wife kneads the dough, her hands unknowingly working a hallucinogen into the village's daily bread. The loaf she pulls from the oven is dark, dense. It tastes slightly bitter, But in a time of hunger, no one complains. Then you see the girl. You see her take a bite, and you understand what the church buried. The demonic possession isn't supernatural, it's biological. You lean closer, the flame dancing in your eyes. The only sound is the dry, insistent scrape of your fingernail against the brittle parchment, tracing a mark no bigger than a louse. It's not a doodle, it's a ledger. This is the secret that turns history inside out. 99% of people, now and for the next 700 years, will believe the story of the helpless serf, a creature of dirt and despair, trapped in an economic prison. They believe the Lord's word was law, his treasury the only bank, his power absolute. This is the great lie feudalism was built on. Control the cure, and you control the people. Your eyes drift to a small annotation at the bottom of the physician's panicked note. A hand-drawn sketch. He notes the witch used a strange symbol, a mark she painted on her clay medicine jars. Your heart stops. It's the same symbol you found etched into the stonework of the forgotten chapel. The same one drawn on the map of the stars. This wasn't a lone woman. This was a network. They can use your genius to create a new orthodoxy, a new, more subtle form of control that locks humanity out of its own deepest secrets, not with fear, but with logic. They win by letting you win. The day comes when the church bells ring out across the fields, signaling the end of the plague's grip. The roads are open. The world is returning. You can go back to Cambridge, back to the world of men and ideas. But you are not the same man who fled the city a year ago. The flame of human curiosity wasn't extinguished by accident. It was snuffed out, carefully and systematically, by an invisible hand. Every lost medical technique, every suppressed astronomical chart, every philosophical argument that was burned and buried, it was all part of the same project. A project to build a 1,000-year intellectual prison and convince the inmates that the walls were the edge of the universe. What they don't want you to know is the sheer scale of the loss. The first breadcrumb has been laid on a path leading directly into the heart of an unthinkable conspiracy. The symbol whispers of a knowledge that shouldn't exist. You see it again next to the name of a French abbess from 1314, a woman named Heloise of Chartres. Her official story: she was granted a vision of the heavenly host and ascended to sainthood after composing a hymn of such divine beauty, it was said to make angels weep. The forbidden text tells a darker truth. This is the secret they built an empire of ignorance to bury. It was a triumph of social engineering. A hidden hand, moving behind thrones and altars, orchestrated the collapse. They fostered the plagues by destroying the sanitation knowledge of the Romans. They encouraged the superstition by burning the philosophers. They created a controllable, illiterate, terrified populace that would fight their wars, till their fields, and never, ever ask the right questions. A populace that would blame demons in the fog, not the men in the castles. The metaphors don't align with the chemical processes you know so well. Purify the body with the fire of the mind. Dissolve the crown in the peasant's water. It feels less like a recipe and more like a sermon, a warning. Then your eye catches a line of Latin, written in a different, clearer hand in the margin, as if a later owner was leaving a clue for the worthy. Aurum non est premium, est lacuus. Gold is not the prize, it is the trap. The blood drains from your face. A trap? For whom? It begins not with a greeting, but with a sound. Listen, the letter pleads. Can you hear it? The sound of my hammer? Not the proud ring of a master artisan striking true, but the dull, shameful thump, thump, thump of a liar striking wood. For 2 years, brother, that was the music of my damnation. The writer, a man named Giacomo, was once the pride of Florence. Now he's in exile. And you know the official story. He was cast out for shoddy work, for shaming his guild. The same secret mark you saw etched on the bottom of the disgraced knight's flask. The same symbol hidden in the illuminated manuscript of the heretic monk. She was not alone. This wasn't the act of one rogue midwife. It was an underground railroad of forbidden medicine, a conspiracy of healers, a network of women sharing secrets in whispers, saving lives in the shadows, their knowledge a candle flickering against the storm of patriarchal ignorance. And you are now one of them. You hold the secret, and the weight in your hands is no longer just a book. You close your eyes, and the scriptorium dissolves. You are no longer the reader. You are the witness. You are in that French field under a humid summer sky. You see the stalks of rye, heavy with grain. But something is wrong. Clinging to the kernels are hard, purplish-black growths, like tiny dark horns. Ergot, a fungus. To 99% of the medieval world, it's just a sign of a poor harvest. But a very few, know its other secret. You watch the farmer harvest the grain, the dark kernels mixing with the good. You hold the document under the guttering candlelight, the smell of beeswax and damp wool filling your small, cold chamber. To any other scholar, any bailiff, any priest, this is kindling, a scrap. But you see what they cannot. You aren't just reading the words, you are reading the silence between them. In the margins, where the ink has bled into the cheap animal skin, are the marks. They look like incidental flecks, stray doodles from a clumsy scribe. But your alchemical studies have taught you a different kind of literacy, the language of symbols, of hidden meaning. They couldn't permit a peasant, a woman, to hold the power of life and death in her dirt-caked hands. That power belonged to God, and by extension, to them. So they buried her secret, rebranding ancient medical wisdom as satanic heresy. You can almost hear the wet, pulpy sound of her grinding herbs in a stone mortar, a sound they twisted into the bubbling of a demonic brew. It's a pattern you recognize, an echo resonating even now, centuries later, when powerful interests fund studies to discredit cheaper, natural solutions that threaten a multi-billion-dollar industry. You are helping to build a new, safer prison, a cage of pure materialism that dismisses anything that cannot be measured or weighed. A world where no one would ever even think to look for the pre-Adamic tongue because they no longer believe such things could possibly exist. The thought is a masterpiece of paranoia, yet it feels chillingly plausible. They don't need to kill you. They just need to champion you. They can let you publish your Principia Mathematica. They can make you the head of the Royal Society. You stand up and walk to the small leaded glass window, staring out into the plague-haunted twilight. The air is still. The famous apple tree stands as a dark silhouette against the bruised purple sky. For centuries, historians have called this period the Dark Ages, a term meant to evoke a time of ignorance, superstition, and intellectual stagnation. You laugh, a short, bitter sound that dies in the stillness of the room. It wasn't a dark age, it was a deliberately darkened one. The ignorance wasn't a condition, It was a creation, an engineered reality. The official cause was a vow of silence taken to its mortal extreme. Beside Aldrich's name, in the margin of this forbidden account, is the symbol. It's not a cross, it's not a religious icon. It's something else. A circle pierced by a jagged line with 3 dots beneath it. An alchemical sign? A printer's mark? No. You have the sudden dawning horror that it's a signature. A killer's calling card, hidden in plain sight for 400 years. And you realize, with a cold knot tightening in your stomach, this wasn't just one murder. This was a program. It is a dam, meticulously designed and built, stone by heavy stone, over generations. The coded art, the saints pointing to hidden stars, the numbers woven into tapestries. They aren't just secrets. They are the architect's signature on their great work. It's not a series of independent, reactionary events. It is a single, coordinated, multi-generational project. A conspiracy so vast, so patient, that it used centuries as its canvas. The chilling realization washes over you, a cold tide that extinguishes the last of your warmth. The Dark Ages were not an accident of history. They were an achievement. The vellum pages are impossibly thin, covered in a script so dense with codes and ciphers, it seems to vibrate with contained energy. You lean in, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. Years of study have prepared you for this moment. You recognize the symbols, the Ouroboros eating its own tail, the green lion devouring the sun, the coded instructions for furnace temperatures and distillations. It's all here. But as you begin the slow, painstaking work of translation, a cold unease creeps up your spine. The phrasing is wrong. The most valuable object in your world, the splinter of the true cross, enshrined in gold and velvet, that your king knelt before, was carved in a Florentine workshop last Tuesday. You hold the proof in your hands, a piece of smuggled paper so thin the candlelight shines right through it. The ink is smudged, not with carelessness, but with the sweat of a man running for his life. You are Isaac Newton, but tonight, you are just a man in a cold room. And the letter you are reading is a confession that could burn the world down. The battle is ancient and unending. The keepers of dogma versus the seekers of truth. On the final page, the hurried script gives way to a single, elegant sentence. For the skills I now possess, and for the drawing of the lunar cut, I give my eternal thanks to the network. Below it is the diagram she mentioned, a clean, crescent-shaped incision marked with measurements and notes on muscle groups. And beside it, a small, familiar symbol is stamped into the parchment. A serpent coiled around a sprig of belladonna. The script is hurried, jagged, as if written by a man whose hand was shaking. It's a note left by a visiting monk, a man whose name is lost to history. 4 forbidden words that change everything. Le seigle est noir. The rye is black. For a moment, you just stare at the words. To the priests who wrote the official account, they meant nothing. A note about a spoiled crop, perhaps. But you, a student of the earth, of botany, you understand immediately. The breath catches in your throat. It's not a clue, it's a confession. The richest man in the village wasn't the lord in his damp stone castle. He was the peasant in the mud and wattle hovel. And this is the secret they were willing to die for. The parchment in your hands is worthless. It's a peasant's will, a legal fiction for a man who owned nothing but his own servitude. His name was Thom, and he left his son a single, sickly pig and a chipped wooden bowl. To the church, a tithe of imagined grain. To the Lord, a lifetime of yielding 90% of his soul. He admits her poultice of willow bark and moldy bread had a 70% success rate against the festering infections that were killing the local nobility in their silk-draped beds. Think about that. A peasant woman with nothing but weeds and rot was creating a primitive form of aspirin and penicillin. While the king's finest doctors were bleeding men to death, she was saving them. 99% of people who read the official histories will never learn this. They'll see a witch. You see a genius. The church couldn't allow it. It is a truth that feels solid and real in a world of manufactured lies. And then you have a revelation, one more terrible than any of the others. What if your science, your beautiful, logical system of the world, is exactly what they want? The congregation, in its modern form, would see a man like you not as a threat, but as an asset. Your mechanistic universe, a universe of cold, predictable laws, is the perfect antidote to the old world of magic and divine languages. You are, unintentionally, doing their work for them. It has simply changed its name and its methods. The secret society that murdered Heloise of Chartres for her knowledge of herbs might still be out there, hunting for men like you. Men who get too close to the fundamental truths of the world. Your research into the nature of light and gravity is no longer a simple academic pursuit. It's an intrusion into someone else's territory. And they have a history of dealing with intruders. You push the manuscripts away, your hands trembling slightly. Anthony's fire in the soul, of limbs twitching uncontrollably, of a thirst that no water could quench, and of panicked screaming about 1,000 burning spiders crawling beneath the skin. You can almost feel the chill of that stone chapel, the damp air thick with the metallic taste of fear. 99% of people who read about Saint Aldrich accept the tale of a holy death. What they don't know is that the monk who wrote the terrified account was found dead a week later. His tongue cut out. The brittle crackle of parchment is the only sound as you slide the timeline of suppressed medicine. Every healer burned, every herbal text condemned over the vellum map of destroyed libraries. The lights that went out across Europe were not snuffed by accident. You see the marks of the arsonists. You overlay the ledger of financial deceit. The same sigils, the same hidden accounts that funded the wars, also funded the monasteries that locked knowledge away. 99% of people believe history is a river flowing chaotically towards the present. But you see the truth. History is not a river. A 12th century text, bound in dark, cracked leather, its clasp sealed with wax 600 years ago. This is it, the rumor that has haunted your dreams, the key to the magnum opus, the philosopher's stone. Your fingers, stained with ink and acid, tremble as you crack the seal. A puff of ancient dust, carrying the ghosts of dead monks and heretics, rises into the candlelight. The sound is a dry, delicate whisper, the last breath of a sealed tomb. You open the cover. It could be used to build a new world, or to bring this one crashing down. The question, which chills you more than the damp air in this room, is what the network wants you to do with it. To bring a child into the world through a path not of nature was to birth a creature without a soul. The punishment for such a crime was not prison. It was the pyre. The metallic taste of fear coats your tongue. the same fear she must have felt. Her revolutionary knowledge, a death sentence. It's a direct line, an unbroken thread of terror and defiance, connecting her to every modern researcher who has had their work suppressed, every doctor who has risked their career to try an experimental treatment forbidden by bureaucratic bodies who value rules more than life. It speaks of a girl, no older than 14, whose body began to twist into blasphemous shapes, of men who ran through the cobbled streets, screaming that their skin was on fire, clawing at phantom insects crawling beneath their flesh. The record describes mass convulsions during Sunday service, terrifying, shared hallucinations of winged beasts, and prophecies spoken in tongues that no one understood, but everyone feared. It's a perfect, terrifying tale of demonic possession, but your finger traces a faint stain in the margin of the 7th page. It's a different ink, a different hand. A book of heretical medicine, of cures and anatomical knowledge so advanced it felt like witchcraft. He confesses he gave it to a fellow brother, a man he names only once, for safekeeping in a place he believed Rome could never find. But you know what they don't want you to know. Her spells were actually detailed herbal remedies, knowledge passed down through generations of women who knew the land better than any priest knew his Bible. You trace the faded iron gall ink, your breath held tight in your chest. Tucked inside the official record, bound by a single fraying thread, is a suppressed report, a note from a local physician, his writing rushed, almost fearful. Every official history you read, every sermon you recall, every pronouncement from a king or a bishop now feels like a lie. You see the hidden machinery beneath the surface of everything. You understand that history is not a river that flows. It is a garden that is ruthlessly pruned, cultivated, and weeded by unseen hands. One afternoon, you force yourself to work on your equations. You sketch out the inverse square law, the elegant mathematics that govern the fall of an apple and the orbit of the moon. It is clean. It is pure. To be the sole gatekeepers of the ultimate secrets, not just of God, but of matter itself? 99% of people see alchemy as a foolish quest for gold. You now see it for what it truly was, a battleground for the soul of reality. The quest for the Philosopher's Stone wasn't about wealth, it was about power. The power to transmute, to transform, to create and destroy. The ultimate tool of control. The same men who had once manufactured saints were now trying to manufacture the building blocks of the universe. The conspiracy hasn't ended. It says he was found in his chapel, eyes wide with ecstasy, a beatific smile on his lips as he spoke of seeing the Virgin Mary descend on a pillar of light. His final words, recorded for all time, were, "Such brightness. I am consumed by love." A beautiful story. But in the forbidden text, the one that smells of smoke and fear, the story is different. The page is brittle, the Latin script cramped and hurried. Here, a fellow monk describes Aldrich's final hours not with reverence, but with terror. He writes of a saint. The greatest lie ever told is not a story. It is an entire era. You are in the cold dawn of your study, and the single candle flame, a tiny, defiant star against the gray light, gutters as if in fear. Your fingers, stained with ink and numb from the chill, trace the connections on the floor. Manuscripts are not scattered, they are arranged. A constellation of deceit. You've been awake for 3 nights, fueled by a terrifying hypothesis. a madness that now feels like the only sanity left in the world. The greatest lie in alchemy was never that you could turn lead into gold. The true lie, the one they guarded with their lives, was why they wanted you to believe it. The tallow candle sputters, its weak flame throwing your shadow, a towering, hunched giant, against the cold stone of your study. The air is thick with the scent of old paper, beeswax, and the metallic tang of obsession. Before you, on the scarred oak table, lies the prize. The centerpiece of a lifetime of collecting, of bribing, of searching through the forgotten attics of history. It was about looking good to hold on to power. You stare at the revealed words, the ink now a stark, damning brown against the vellum. This single piece of parchment proves it. The official persecution, the sermons against sodomy, the public burnings, they were for the common folk. For the powerful, there were other rules, secret rules. You now hold the proof of a love that dared not speak its name, and a conspiracy of families that allowed it to survive in the shadows. This knowledge is a heavy stone, but her notes, scribbled in the margins, make it a heresy of the highest order. She writes of the mother's pulse, of the wine and poppy milk used to dull the pain, of the hot iron and spider silk used to seal the vessels. She describes stitching the womb closed. This is not the crude, post-mortem butchery the church permitted on a dead woman to baptize the infant's soul before it, too, perished. This was a successful surgery on a living mother. The church had declared it an abomination. To interfere with God's judgment in childbirth was witchcraft. The official story claims the devil entered the village of Oeil-de-Loup in the summer of 1287. But the devil they wrote about in the church chronicles, that wasn't the real secret. The real secret is what they chose to leave out. You are sitting in a stone chamber, centuries later, the air thick with the scent of aging parchment and cold dust. Before you lies the official record, its vellum pages brittle as dead leaves. The Latin script is immaculate, detailing the horror that befell the village. The Dark Ages, you realize with a cold dread, weren't an accident. They were a construction, a carefully managed blackout. Someone had deliberately, meticulously turned out all the lights. This monk's hidden testimony is the proof. He was one of the men who did it, his secret buried in a wool merchant's accounts, a truth hiding in the most boring place imaginable. But as your eyes scan the last, desperate lines of the fragment, your heart stops. He writes of his great sin, not the burning, but the one text he couldn't destroy. The church called her a witch for a reason, but it's not the one you were taught. The secret they buried with her ashes is that she was a better doctor than any man in the kingdom. You unroll a brittle scroll, the vellum so dry it crackles like burning leaves under your fingertips. It's a transcript from a 14th century witch trial. The official record, written in a stern, accusatory hand, says the woman was burned for consorting with demons. It speaks of incantations whispered over bubbling cauldrons, of pacts signed in blood. You wake with a start, the scent of phantom smoke in your nostrils. The plague year drags on. The solitude that was once a scholarly blessing is now a form of imprisonment. The silence of the house is no longer peaceful, it's watchful. You have stopped your work on the manuscripts. You have pushed them into the back of a heavy oak chest and locked it. But the knowledge cannot be locked away. It is inside you. It has rewired your understanding of the world. The book was published just 20 years ago. The symbol was used in its pages to represent a concept he called materia prima, the chaotic, primal matter from which all things, including gold, could be created. A shiver racks your body, a cold dread that has nothing to do with the draft. The congregation didn't die out with the Middle Ages. They evolved. They went deeper underground. They shed their religious skin and cloaked themselves in the new religion, science. Or rather, its mystical cousin, alchemy. What if they were no longer just suppressing knowledge, but actively seeking to control it? Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. But be warned, some truths about the past are harder to forget than others. Your finger, smudged with ink, traces the first name, Aldrich of Kent. The official chronicle, bound in pristine leather, describes his end in 1252. And the one thing that hasn't changed in 700 years is their willingness to make you pay it. A truth that proves the masters of this world don't just rule the living, they profit from the dead. And now, you are the only one who knows. The flame sputters, casting your terrified face in shadow. The two books on the table are no longer just records. They are a death sentence, and you can't be sure which one it's for. The document shatters the sanitized history they sell in chronicles and sermons. This isn't about piety, it's about pragmatism. It reveals a hidden world of quiet tolerance, not of love, but of necessity. To preserve the name, to continue the line, to hold the lands, any arrangement can be made, as long as the illusion of conformity remains absolute. It's the same cold calculation you see in the carefully managed lives of modern politicians and celebrities, whose public smiles conceal private truths the world is not permitted to see. It was never about being good. This is knowledge that is not supposed to exist outside the lecture halls of Padua or Paris. And even there, it is the study of the dead, not the living. Then you turn the page, and your breath catches in your throat. It's a diagram of a procedure. A blade, thin and curved like a sliver of the new moon, slicing through the layers of skin and muscle. A hand reaching inside. A child being lifted from the red cradle of its mother's body. This is the Caesarean cut. The pricks correspond to locations within the monastery grounds. The old well, the abandoned scriptorium, the crypts. The sailor knew they were coming for him. Before they took him to the fire, he left one last secret behind, and he hid it right here, in the heart of the beast that would devour him. He writes of his complicity, the horror of feeding Aristotle's logic, Ovid's poetry, and scrolls of Roman engineering into the flames, all while his brothers chanted psalms to drown out the screams of a dying civilization. You run a thumb over the page, and the whisper of burnt carbon flaking onto your skin is an almost unbearable ASMR of destruction. This is the medieval version of memory holing, the same chillingly precise erasure of the past that modern regimes use to control the present, rewriting textbooks and deleting digital archives. The final haunting image is not of Newton the scientist, but of Newton the custodian, a lonely warden of a terrible secret, forever looking over his shoulder, wondering if the key he holds is for a prison he has escaped or for one he has just helped to perfect. He will go to his grave with this knowledge, leaving us with a final, chilling question. What other secrets did the greatest mind in history discover that he was too afraid to tell us? The search for the Philosopher's Stone isn't about gold. It's about rediscovering this language. And you, with your obsessive quest to define the laws of gravity and motion, are getting closer to that language than anyone in centuries. You are not just a threat to their authority. You are a rival. Sleep offers no escape. You dream of burning libraries where the books scream as they turn to ash. You dream of the symbol, the circle, the line, the 3 dots branded onto the inside of your own eyelids. The symbol isn't just a record of past assassinations. It's a threat of future ones. The candle gutters, casting your shadow long and distorted against the stone wall. It dances like a specter as you make a connection that sends a tremor of ice through your veins. The symbol, the circle, the line, the 3 dots. You've seen it before, not in these medieval texts, but in a contemporary alchemical treatise you studied at Cambridge. A book by a man who called himself Irenaeus Philalethes, a mysterious figure rumored to have discovered the Philosopher's Stone. But a scorched fragment of an alchemist's journal, tucked inside one of the books, hints their visions weren't from God. They were symptoms of a sophisticated poison known only to a select few. The truth hits you with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't divine intervention. This was a series of political assassinations, laundered by faith and sanitized for history. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. The scientist who commits suicide before releasing data that would bankrupt a powerful corporation. The activist who disappears. The methods are quieter now, but the motive is eternal. Protect the institution. Protect the lie. You stare at the ancient ink, and a cold dread crystallizes in your gut. These 3 people carried a secret. They were silenced. Now, because of this manuscript, you carry that same secret. The shadows in the room deepen, and the soft moan of the wind outside the window suddenly sounds like a footstep. You've just learned the price of forbidden knowledge. You lean back, the chair groaning in the silence, and the taste of metal fills your mouth. It's the taste of a very modern fear. Because you realize this dark alchemy, turning people into numbers to erase them, never ended. It's the same shadow play used by modern states that manipulate census data to disenfranchise a minority, that doctor unemployment figures to cling to power, that suppress public health statistics to justify policy. The tools have changed from quills to keyboards, but the motive is identical: to erase inconvenient populations from the record. You have stumbled upon the kingdom's foundational lie. A spidery script written in an ink made of secrets, now blooming from the page like dark flowers in a poisoned garden. The hidden clause appears. It is not a legal addendum. It is a confession, a conspiracy. It states in stark, undeniable terms the truth that changes everything. This marriage is a performance, a lavender marriage, a term that will not be invented for centuries, but a practice born of ancient necessity. The groom, young Lord de Courtenay, will perform his duties to secure an heir, but his heart and his bed belong to another, the bride's own brother. But the ink on this brittle parchment, smelling faintly of iron, tells a different story. You open the journal. Her script is tight, hurried, the words practically tripping over each other in their desperation to be recorded. before the priest makes his nightly rounds. But then you see the drawings. They are not the crude sketches of a peasant. They are miracles of anatomical precision, lines drawn with a steady hand that belie the trembling script. A womb, detailed with its thick, muscular walls, the twist of a cord, the position of a placenta. You are made into a pariah, a modern heretic. The truth has always been a dangerous cargo. Your eyes drift back to the chart, scanning the elegant alien constellations. You almost miss it. Next to a cluster of stars, one the church doesn't even recognize, is a series of tiny, almost invisible pinpricks in the paper. They aren't random, they're a pattern. You trace them with a trembling finger, your mind racing. This isn't a map of the heavens, it's a map of the earth, a map of this very place. 99% of people believe the great works of Rome and the pre-Christian world were simply lost to time and decay. The monk's trembling hand tells a different story. He writes that 97% of what we call lost knowledge wasn't lost at all. It was hunted, it was judged, it was systematically annihilated. You can almost feel the heat, smell the sweet, sickening perfume of burning papyrus scrolls and cracking leather bindings that he describes. The knowledge of 1,000 years turning to ash. A clockwork city running on the laws you defined. A world made sane, but in the quiet of your study, you know the truth. You know that beneath the rational surface, the old magic, the old power, the old fight continues in the shadows. You gave the world, the universe as a predictable machine. You did it, perhaps, to save it from the knowledge that the machine has a ghost that has been hunting the brightest of us for a very, very long time. Perhaps it was about eliminating anyone who might, by accident, stumble upon the building blocks of this lost, powerful science. They weren't just protecting their own power. They were hoarding the very language of creation. They were keeping humanity in a state of enforced ignorance to ensure no one else could ever speak the words that command the stars, move the mountains, or rewrite the laws of the universe. The thought is so immense, so blasphemous and terrifying that you feel a wave of vertigo. You grip the edge of the wooden desk to steady yourself. Perhaps they used it as a threat. Stop your research or your next ecstatic vision will be your last. It's a level of psychological warfare that feels eerily modern. Think of the state-sponsored narratives of your own time, the way inconvenient truths are labeled as madness or treason. The technology has changed, but the blueprint for control remains the same. You stare at the formula, at the elegant, deadly script. The knowledge in this room could bring down the church, but it could also bring its full, terrible weight down upon you. You can smell the dusty sweetness of old parchment and the sharp tang of beeswax from his guttering candle. He isn't writing equations, he's sketching a symbol he keeps finding, a strange recurring mark beside the names of long-dead saints. He uncovers the first part of the lie, a list of 7 so-called saints who all died within days of receiving a holy vision. The official histories, the ones blessed by the church, speak of divine rapture and heavenly light. But you know the metallic taste of fear. You know the gurgling, desperate sound a man makes when a wire is tightened around his throat from behind. That isn't suicide, it's house cleaning. These aren't names on a page anymore. They are ghosts in the room with you. A navigator, a scholar, an artist. 3 people who knew the truth and were systematically, brutally erased for it. and the modern parallel hits you like a physical blow. The journalist who dies in a car accident before publishing their exposé. The skin on your arms crawls as you realize the scale of the deception. The missing people weren't ghosts. They were survivors. Families driven from the homes their ancestors had worked for centuries. Erased from the record with the flick of a quill. Pushed onto the roads to starve for real. Their existence officially denied. The empty graves everyone mourned represented a silent, paper-based slaughter. This is the secret buried deeper than any body. 99% of the official population statistics from this time are a deliberate, monstrous lie. With a single feather quill, you gently brush the solution over the blank space beneath the formal signatures. You hold your breath, the only sound the soft, wet whisper of the feather against the vellum. It's an ASMR quality sound of dread and discovery. For a moment, nothing happens. The vellum darkens slightly, and your stomach plummets. A fool's errand, a ghost you've chased into a dead end. But then, it begins. Like a frost forming on a winter window, faint lines bleed into existence. Slow, ghostly. Her crime. The candle gutters, and your shadow, a monstrous, hunched thing, leaps against the wall. Outside, the village sleeps under a blanket of ignorant piety. They believe what the priest tells them, that the birthing bed is a holy trial, that a mother's death in labor is God's will, a price for Eve's sin. You know this is a lie, manufactured by men who have never felt the terror of a child trapped sideways in the womb. 99% of historians will tell you what comes next was impossible. They will call it a fantasy, a fiction. You see the climate scientist on the news, her face strained, presenting data on rising seas to a panel of smirking politicians funded by oil money. You see the physician whose groundbreaking research on a pandemic is buried, his reputation destroyed online by corporate-funded trolls because his findings might threaten a patent worth billions. They are dragged to a public square and set aflame. The fire is different now. It's the fire of having your funding cut, your life's work ridiculed, your name dragged through the mud until you are professionally and socially incinerated. What they don't want you to know is that the monasteries, lauded as the flickering candles of knowledge in a benighted world, were also the furnaces. The monk, a brother Thalius, does not write of copying texts. He writes of burning them. He describes a secret mandate, an unspoken crusade not against heathens, but against history itself. To create a year zero, to scour the world of any thought, any science, any philosophy that did not spring from their one sanctioned truth. It shows that the official story is never the full story, and that history is a battlefield where the deadliest weapon is the eraser. The truth you found is a haunting reminder that the darkest ages are not always in the past, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act is not to discover something new, but to remember what has been deliberately forgotten. The chest remains locked. The secret is kept. You look out your window one last time, not at an apple tree, but at the sprawling gaslit city of London. That to speak a thing's true name in this tongue was to have absolute power over it. A fanciful myth, of course. The kind of superstition you, the father of modern science, should dismiss out of hand. But what if it wasn't a myth? 99% of people believe magic is a fairy tale. But what if magic was just the name given to a science so advanced it was indistinguishable from the divine? a science the congregation claimed for its own. Perhaps the suppression of thinkers like Aldrich and Friedrich wasn't just about protecting church doctrine. It was designed not just to kill, but to do so in a way that perfectly mimicked the descriptions of mystical union from the writings of Teresa of Avila or John of the Cross. It was, in essence, weaponized theology. The most shocking detail, the one that makes your stomach turn, is a note in the margin of the recipe. It details the annulling agent, the antidote. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a system of control with a failsafe. The agents of the congregation could administer the poison, observe the effects, and if necessary, reverse them. In the year of our Lord, 1665, the Great Plague has emptied the cities, forcing a young Newton into a solitary quarantine at his family home of Woolsthorpe Manor. But he hasn't just brought his books on mathematics and light. He's brought something else, something dangerous. A collection of half-burnt, condemned manuscripts he secretly acquired from a disgraced librarian at Cambridge. As you sit with him, the only sounds are the spit and hiss of the fire and the frantic scratch of his quill. He forged relics designed to expose the absurdity of the entire system. He created the Tears of St. Peter that were chemically identical to pig fat, the splinter of the true cross that was provably oak from a recently felled English forest. He was trying to wake people up, to show them the grift. He was arrested before he could leak his masterpiece, a forged papal bull declaring all church wealth should be given to the poor, signed with an impossibly perfect replica of the Pope's own seal. The report says he hanged himself, a land grab hidden behind a shroud of tragedy. The horrifying truth blooms in your mind, a black flower of pure, calculated evil. The lords and the bishops, the men of power and the men of God, they were working together. They saw the famine not as a curse, but as an opportunity. They systematically inflated the death tolls, creating a ghost army on paper. For every family that starved, they added 2 more to the list, declared their land abandoned, and seized it. A massacre by ledger, an administrative genocide. Inside is a clear liquid, distilled from a recipe you copied from a forbidden alchemical text, a process involving galls, vitriol, and secrets the church would burn you for knowing. The air in the stone chamber is cold, biting at your skin, but a single drop of sweat traces a path down your spine. If you are wrong, you will have destroyed an unpriceless legal document. If you are right, you will own a truth more dangerous than any sword. You unstop the vial. The scent is acrid, metallic, like a lightning strike. The prayer book doesn't feel right. It's too heavy for God alone. The scent of dried yarrow and beeswax hangs thick in the air, a fragile shield against the damp rot seeping through the stone. Your fingers, smudged with soot and fear, trace the gilded cross on the leather cover. It is cold, impersonal, but inside, tucked behind the Psalms of Penitence, your nail finds the slit, a false backing, a secret heart beating within the holy text. You pry it open, and a much smaller book, bound in soft, worn doeskin, slides into your palm. This is her journal. Your heart hammers against your ribs. It's the same one. The interlocking circles you found scratched into the stone behind the wine barrels. The same sigil stamped onto the lead amulet you pried from the dead pilgrim's fist. This wasn't just one man's rebellion. It was a language, a mark of trust passed between members of an underground railroad of knowledge, a silent fraternity of those who chose dangerous truths over comfortable lies. In a dizzying flash, the 700 years between you and this condemned sailor collapse into nothing. You see the modern parallel with sickening clarity. A single, fire-blackened page, brittle as a dead leaf, flutters from between the thick vellum sheets and lands silently on the stone floor. You kneel, your breath held tight in your chest. The edges of the page are scorched into black lace. The Latin script is tight, frantic, written by a hand shaking with something more than cold. The date is there, impossibly clear. 1208. This isn't an account book. It's a confession, and it reveals a truth so profound it feels like a physical blow. It is a question that haunts us today. Who are the gatekeepers of our knowledge? What truths are being deemed not fit to be printed for our own good? The intellectual prison of the Middle Ages may have been dismantled, but we must always be vigilant for the signs that a new one is being built around us. Not with stone walls and iron bars, but with curated information, social pressure, and the quiet dismissal of inconvenient questions. The ultimate revelation from your quarantine is not about a secret society. It is about the fragility of truth itself. Or is there something else? Something they discovered long ago that they are desperate to keep hidden from the rest of humanity. You remember a fragment from the most damaged manuscript, a text that was almost entirely obliterated by fire. Only a few sentences survived, scorched around the edges. It didn't speak of saints or poisons. It spoke of the pre-Adamic tongue, a language that existed before the fall of man. The writer claimed this language didn't just describe reality, it could command it. Not of saints, but of ingredients, hidden within a book of Psalms, written in a cipher that uses musical notes as letters, is the full recipe for the vision poison. 97% of medieval medicine was a brutal guessing game of bloodletting and prayer. But this is different. It's a complex compound of refined ergot, belladonna, and a stabilizing agent derived from a rare salamander toxin, something that only a master alchemist could conceive. They tell you an apple falling from a tree changed the world, but 99% of people don't know the real story happening behind that closed door. The secret that truly terrified Isaac Newton wasn't gravity. It was a truth buried for 500 years, a truth he found scrawled in the margins of a forbidden medieval book. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages.